Welcome to the Nurture Pod. My name is Iris Sullivan Dare, and I'm here with the beautiful Ginger Edwards. And this is the place where we explore that in between what is and what is possible. And yeah, that's how are you doing today, beautiful Ginger?
I'm good. I am in my birthday week, so I'm excited.
Yay!
My birthday is December 6th. Gifts can be sent to, no, just kidding. Sagittarians are never very shy about their birthdays. We love to talk about them. So yeah, I'm feeling excited and in a good mood. And also just, birthday week is like brings up a lot of annual like memory, like, oh. And one of the things I realized was we started this podcast in a hot spring in
Yes.
New Mexico together as we were chatting, talking about things, and I think this idea came at that birthday trip on my 50th birthday.
Yeah, totally. I can totally. Yeah, like we were sitting in that farthest pool that had the tree with the mistletoe over top
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it was a
on the Rio
really
Grande River.
it was on the Rio Grande, but it had that same kind of clear blue sky that we've been having this week on the coast. And we had like a really pretty tree. And it kind of looked like the willow trees. Anyway, I've just been reminded of that day and that moment lately. It's just like my memory of that moment is really, and we're on episode 26. So we did it, Iris. Like we
Oh my
took that
God.
conversation and we actually created 26 episodes of a podcast, which is so cool.
I'm super proud of us, and
Yeah.
I still feel so grateful to have gotten to do that trip. That was you were the mastermind, and that trip was like real peak peak
It was
life.
super
It
fun.
was a
Yeah.
peak life event, and yeah, and I just love everyone. I didn't know anyone but you,
That's
basically,
wild.
before we
That's
went.
wild.
And now I just love all of those women so much. And I mean, obviously, I still love you so much. So yeah, happy birthday. It
Thank
was
you.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's kind of you get that little nice like reminder of like, oh, a year ago we didn't even do this. Like this wasn't a thing. So it's so cool.
Oh, that is actually, that's a great segue.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think
Segue it.
I think that's a great segue because when we stop and reflect, often we're much more accomplished
Mm,
than we give ourselves credit for because the to-do list usually exceeds available time. And so I feel like I spend a lot of time feeling like I'm so behind, and like or I've got too much
mm,
to do or like I'm not getting enough done and but when it's really great having some concrete times to check in,
yeah.
and your solar return is a great natural time to do it. Like, but like there's so many opportunities. We all have so many different kinds of anniversaries and like seasonal shifts. And like, I kind of think that taking stock more often is is good.
Yeah. Otherwise, we just get waylaid by the day to day hustle of it all, right? It's just kind of, and it never is enough, like you said. So we're always in this constant state of like not caught up, not enough, never. And then when you step back and you're like, well, wait, like actually we started a whole podcast just from a conversation sitting in a hot spring like that. That was pretty cool. We did that on top of all the other things we're doing, right? With that's just
Yes,
one
yes.
influential. You don't know how these seeds, these little tiny seeds that get planted along the way, what they're going to emerge into. It's kind of it's really fascinating when you think about. And I'm sure everyone's in this. I just got my Spotify,
Uh,
list of the year, like your download, and I'm like, I'm sure everyone's experiencing this like reflection moment as we're in the last month of the year. But yeah, it's I'm turning 51, so now it's like the big 50 is over, and now I'm like merging into this new decade, and it's been a really good year, I think. What do you feel about 2024 so far? I mean, it's pretty much ending out, so.
so since I talked to you last, so I was realizing that I have been running
Mm,
this year. Like I've just had kind of a little overstretched like for an extended period of time. And I mean, I think a lot of people do this. I totally gaslight myself into like, oh, after I'm done with X deadline, then I'll be so relaxed. I'll have so much time. But it's like realistically, that's never the case. But if I don't tell myself that, then I just like can't do it. So, but I'm not sure that I should be doing it, is my realization this last week. And I'm like, you know what, do I really have to do that market? And do I really have to do, like, there are a couple, and so I was like, you know what? I kind of don't. I think that like
Mm,
when I looked at how much time is left, and and I know myself, and I know that my brain never stops. So if I have a thing that I have to do, I am completely consumed with whatever that is. So
mhm.
so there's no opt out in my brain.
Yeah.
So so anyway, so I realized it's not too late. It's not going to be a hardship. I'm going to check in and I'm going to cancel. I'm going to withdraw from
Mm,
these three things.
mm,
And so now I do feel like I'm like, I did, this is super not my normal MO, right? It's like do or die. I've committed. I want to be reliable. I'm gonna be there, blah, blah, blah. And
mm,
so unless my body forces me to not do something, which
mm.
is not an ideal way to operate, to wait until your body's like, time's
No,
up,
it's not.
So anyway, so I'm feeling super proud of myself for doing that because it didn't cause anybody any hardship. Like,
Mhm,
like everyone was cool with it. They had a waiting list. They were like, oh yeah, this is totally fine. Like, they hadn't posted the poster yet. Like, so like everything's cool. And I am facing the first Christmas that I can remember, and I'm just saying Christmas because, the holiday season, we're
mhm,
not, deep Christmas people, but this is the first holiday season that I have not had like a whole bunch of
mm,
external busyness creating Christmas cheer, really holiday cheer for other people, either baking
mhm,
for them or making
mhm,
crafts and selling them at crafts markets. And like, in which the downside of being in the service industry is that you don't really get holidays. And, we like, how did we celebrate the boys' whole growing up? We just, the world was stopped for that day, Christmas Day. So we did nothing. Like we would make breakfast, we would do our stockings, we would go
mhm,
for a walk. That's what we've done for Christmas
mhm,
for their whole life.
mhm.
And I'm like, you know what? They're going to be home for a couple of weeks. Like, what can we go for a hike? Can we do like what can we do? Like, because I'm choosing to do that instead of
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. I also will reflect that this is one of the very first holidays in a long time, certainly since I got North Fork 53, that I have not been like in Christmas markets, farmers markets, selling tea, or doing what, organizing things, running around, hosting people at my place, throwing events. Like I'm just like, it's really quiet, and it feels really good. Yeah. It feels really, really good. And when I was a farmer, I realized like one of my greatest joys of farming vegetables was that I got the winter off, and I got it like really off. No one expected anything from me. The money was in, the crop was in, and I really got to experience that seasonal rhythm where it's like you hibernate, you rest, you
Yes.
sleep, you take downtime, you might take a little trip or something, but like really you're off the clock until the sunlight comes back enough to stimulate plant growth, which is like late February. Then you start again, but you get this nice window from like, Thanksgiving was our kind of our last boxes went out, and then all the way through, pretty much like late February. So yeah, I love that. Like, and I loved not having to do anything. The holidays are no hustle. My birthday is really early in the month, so I always like, yay, my birthday, and then that was it. And we usually disappear to Asia somewhere in January, when I was farming, because I could, and I would just have enough money to go blow it all on a trip, and then I'd be dead broke when I got back, and I would hit up my CSA, and it would start all over again. It's like I took on the debt for the season, and then I would work really, really hard to pay it all off. But I actually really enjoyed that. And when I got North 453, it became, yeah, you were in the service industry again. Now I was doing lodging, events, and then the tea company
Yes.
started back up. So now I'm doing products like sales. And I had a career in retail, like 16 years of retail before that. So Christmas was always a thing. You had a store, you sold stuff, like you were always like, that's your big money maker. You were always on. And when I started farming, it was like such a relief to get out of that. And now I just feel like with the tea company sold, I'm not doing it. And it's like, oh, I'm back to that good feeling of not being, tangled up in that economic necessity of the push of the consumerism of Christmas. And it feels really, really good just to, because winter solstice to me, which I will honor every year because I love it. It's like this dark,
Yes. Yes.
dreamy kind of, yeah, quiet, star filled, magical night. It's like the longest night of the year. It's such a different energy than which is like, I mean, I love Christmas as a kid. I don't do it as much anymore, but I mean, I still love all the twinkly lights and all the things, but you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
hustle, like the American, hustle, the economic engine that is Christmas is, oh, so good not to be plugged in to that
And
right now.
and and it's like, what is your, like when you're saying until there's enough light for the plants to grow again?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and you were always, you talk about this a lot, but like we are also solar powered. Like,
Totally.
so
Totally.
like
Yeah.
it's not the natural time to have a big push this time of year. Like our
Yeah.
animal bodies are really just wanting to sleep
Yeah.
more and like, you know, yeah, like all, yeah, like and it's a very interesting thing the when society has these things that are so contrary to our actual nature,
Yeah.
these expectations that are contrary
Yeah.
to how we are, which is another good segue.
Okay. You're full of segues today. I'm just following along. I'm like, segue yourself along. I'm here for the ride.
I had a really fun day today.
Good.
I this isn't what the segue. This is a segue from the segue. This is my Sitka job is doesn't I don't have I'm not seeing any of those kids this month, but I still am seeing my two after school groups and today was so nice and I realized I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I can't do the activity I was going to do with them because it's nice out, so we have to work outside." So
Mm,
I got up and as soon as it was light out, I went out in my yard with my clippers and I cut a whole bunch of stuff for wreaths.
mm.
And then I texted my neighbor who has a big bay tree and I'm like, "Can I come get some bay for wreaths with my wild things?" And so I made wreaths with a bunch of
Cute.
8, 9, and 10-year-olds. And I was like, as I'm like arriving, I'm thinking, "Oh my God, I'm bringing clippers and wire." Like this is like this, they don't usually have access to this stuff. And I'm like, "All right, everybody, you can cut off your finger with these. So if you
Yeah, don't
haven't
do that.
used them, let's have a little safety talk."
Hmm.
So and nobody got cut.
There you
Everybody,
go.
but they didn't make wreaths. They were making crowns.
Oh, that's cute.
They all wore them.
Nice. Nice. Oh.
But anyway, so that was really happy. So I feel really happy.
Well, it's so funny because when you actually sent me the picture, you texted me the picture of the little wreath. I thought you were making those for your Christmas market. I didn't realize that's what
Oh,
you were
oh
going to
no,
bring
no,
to the
I was,
kids.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I
Oh,
made
that's
a
so
little
funny.
sample and then I just like
Because when
brought
you're
up,
like, I'm not doing any markets, I'm like, why were you making those wreaths?
oh
So
yeah, no, no, I
now
just
I
made
understand.
one
Gotcha.
just
They
to
were
show
cute.
them.
The one you made was beautiful. I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
you could have totally sold that.
I know. And we made little, little mandala kind of, things out of pipe cleaners.
Oh my
But
God. I want to be one of your students so bad. Seems like it would be really fun. It's like
it's super fun.
it's like the dream student. I don't want to I don't want your job. I want to be the student in your class.
Oh my God, I love it. They're totally great. So back to the real thing, what I was going to tell you about,
Okay.
which is yesterday, I realized I'm like, wait, oh, I get to like what, I get to reassess. That's why I took time off. So instead of like hustling, I need, I'm like, let's get my
Wow.
ducks in a row and kind of like reset. So like
Mm,
we totally tore apart our whole main floor of our house over the weekend and put it
mm,
back together and like put up art that's been kind of like crammed in weird places. Like, and so like, it's like, oh my God, yeah, like I have some art from other friends. The good thing about being an artist is that I also have a lot of artist friends. So, I have some beautiful art but like, it wasn't really, it was like, yeah, it looks fabulous.
good.
It makes me super happy because usually our house is embarrassingly chaos.
It's
Um,
not.
so that was awesome. But I was like, you know what? I don't really feel like doing more of that. And so I started kind of just like sussing out and I think I was telling you about this at one point. So when I got sick, which is like when I was like 39, I collapsed. And I spent a few years being pretty sick. And I didn't know initially that I was cancering
Mm,
until a few years in. So, like, I got my official diagnosis when I was 43, but I was dealing with kind of crazy. I was really sick. So,
mm,
I had like all kinds of crazy symptoms and like, but mostly this crushing fatigue that
mm,
I no matter I couldn't get past and like all these weird shit like whatever. I don't have to go into all the sob story of that. But the the thing one of the things that I did at that time was because my sample space at that time did not allow me to say, I need to call some things. I'm trying to do too much. I'm not, my body is saying I can't do this. And so instead, what I was thinking is, how do I do all these things, even though my body is saying you can't do all these
uh,
things?
mm,
But I got really, really good at making the most of the stamina I had.
mm,
And the way that I did that is I became really religious. Also, my brain was so different then, but I became really good. Like every day I would do an assessment and I assigned myself a color. So is this a green day? I get to just go, go, go. Is this a yellow
mm,
day? And so I assigned, and more importantly, I made like a diagnostic chart that I colored in my planner. It was like kind of like I envisioned it like those, like those United Way thermometers.
mm-hmm,
It was like that. So like where am I at? Like what temperature I'm at? So like am I up
mm,
towards the top where I have enough to give? Or and so like once it got to red, those were the days that it wasn't an option. Like I couldn't stand up. So I was
mm,
in bed whether I wanted to or not. So which was the reality of that time period. Like it wasn't. I thought of my body as a loan shark. It was like, oh, I overdid it. Oh shit. And then I'd be like out. I mean, like I was like full out,
yeah,
no choice in the matter. So, but anyway, so that started this thing. And I haven't once I so fast forward that was 2009. This is almost 20 years later now. But I haven't really been that practice kind of fell to the wayside. I had the big, huge, you know, health crisis, recovery, amazing, luminous year of like resetting my life. But I was like, I've been thinking about it. I'm like, that was actually a really, really useful because I realized that the indicators that I need to do a course correction are so obvious when you start looking at them,
mm,
right?
mm-hmm,
It's like, did I do the dishes today? Like, that's a small thing, but it's
mm-hmm,
like, if I didn't, why? you know? Like
mm-hmm,
if it's like, oh, because we ran out because it was such a good sunset that we're like, drop everything, let's go. Like that's not the same as I can't even face it. I'm just gonna go to bed.
yeah,
Those are two
mm-hmm,
different scenarios. So I was like, you know what? I keep doing the thing where I'm cool and like I can tell that I'm starting to overextend myself. And there's a point in which it's a point of no return.
mm-hmm, yep,
And so it's like I wanted to like revisit that thermometer thing and I wanted to have more than green, I'm functioning. So I also have blue and purple now because it's like thriving. What does thriving look like? Define thriving for me. What do I see like objective observations of when I'm thriving?
Hmm.
And then like what are the objective like warning lights on our dashboard? Back
Mm.
to the dashboard.
Yeah, I like that. I have something similar that I got through my coaching program. And actually, I just another coach, it was in my program, just did a practice call with me. Like she's practicing to be a coach. So I was her subject and she went through it with me. So it was kind of cool because it's like right about my birthday. And she's like, so, and they divided up in different areas just to make it even more like there's like relationships, health, career, overall, general satisfaction, spirituality. There's like all these different categories. And then you give each one of them like a rating. So it's like a wheel and you can see on the wheel
Oh,
like where you're at, and then I think the idea is through coaching, like you get coached for a certain amount of time, and then you go back and you do it again, see if anything has changed, like the barometer has changed. But in general, it was really interesting for her to have someone do it with me because I don't usually sit down and give myself that assessment in every category and then have people actually
yeah.
ask good questions while you're giving it like why and what would your 10 look like, if you're not at a 10, what would that even be? Great question, because then you're like, well, okay, like whatever, health, how would you give yourself? Like, is one is the worst? And, I'm like, oh, 7, I don't know. And she's like, okay, well, that's interesting. Like, why'd you give yourself a 7? What would a 10 look like? What would a 1 look like? And so these are all this like really interesting, like self-diagnostics, like you're talking about. So that's the way, it was great. It was great. All my numbers really high. I was really pleased.
Oh, nice.
So
So
much
good.
so that she was like, I don't think you actually need to be coached right now. Like like you're not a good subject, like you're doing pretty good. Like so I wasn't struggling too hard. She needed like somebody to really work on. And I was like, I'm great. Really good. But yeah, it was really, but I had her send it to me because it was really cool. And we both acknowledged like I was having a good day. Do you know what I mean? So
Yes,
like
yes.
I
You
was in
were
a
in
really
the
good mood.
pink.
I was in a good mood that day. I don't even remember why, but it was like, something had just happened. I was like in a really happy mood. So all of my positive thinking about all those subjects was evident in my rating myself. But that's also interesting, like a different
Well,
kind.
and the thing that I'm actually am in a pretty good space right now. Like last week I was in kind of a hard. I think I was like I'd had the theft or whatever the day I talked to you last. So like last week
Mm.
was actually really very challenging for me emotionally and lots of anxiety. And so, but that's perfect because it's fresh in my mind because when you're in that state, it's so
Right.
hard to like see and so like part of what I did when my big journaling drawing thing with my rainbow thermometer was thinking about, okay, at what point do I stop asking for help? Because that's definitely a thing. There's definitely a place in which I am no longer able to ask for help because I've
Mm.
just too consumed with whatever. It'll be too, like there's a point in which I have to take action
Mm.
because and so like thinking about that and because that's the thing I did last week, right? Like I was starting to like I needed some interjection and or interaction. But what are the things that what's in the toolkit once your 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 wagon's turned over or what is it? There's your cart's turned over, right? There's some analogy. Once your
Definitely.
apples are
You
spilled
got a
all
lot of
over.
metaphors going on at once here.
I know I don't have a good one, but like what are the things? It's like, oh, well, getting outside. Like that should be the first thing I do or get in water
Yeah.
some way.
I
What
mean,
are
very often when I start a self assessment, and I don't do it that often. I mean, we're talking about it now, and it's really great for everyone listening to think about doing one because it's fascinating. Because usually it's like that joke. It's like, well, I feel crappy. You're like, well, have you drank any water? No. Have you gone outside? No. Have you taken your
yes.
vitamins the last month? No. Have you done any yoga? No. You know what I mean? Like, when you start actually doing the assessment, it's very clear, like, baby, why you're not feeling so good, right? Like, you're just not taking care of yourself. It's just, things have gotten awry, like out of your usual thing has slipped, or maybe, yeah, the routine that you have developed just by default is like just running. That used to be my default, and I'd have to be extra careful to like stretch or
Yeah,
take
yeah,
care of
yeah, yeah,
myself. Like the
totally.
default one was not help was
Not
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 going to
healthy.
get me into a good high rating on any of those topics. It was like, just I don't know why. It was kind of it falls back into what I think we know how to do unconsciously. And when you're unconscious about any of this stuff, it's like you're running on a real old pattern. It's usually a childhood or stress pattern that you've
And
developed as
also
a survival mechanism.
our society has some real
Absolutely. And you
pressure
can't, and that's
to
what I was going to also
hustle.
say. Like, there's some of this is individual, but I don't think you can ever discount that society plays a role in those numbers. And some of them cannot be changed by you. Some of them can, and some of them are societal. Like sometimes you got to change your life or, make different, bigger choices.
Well, it's like the like, is this a system problem or is this a personal problem?
Exactly.
And we
Exactly.
often take the blame for system problems.
The system loves us to take the blame for
Yeah, yeah.
system
That's
problems,
yeah,
and it
there's
encourages us to like,
yeah, for
oh, if the
sure.
environment's screwed, well, you're not recycling enough. It's like, yeah, I don't think actually think. I mean, I can recycle my entire life, and there still would be a problem. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, yeah.
so that's just one example of how the system tells us that
I haven't
you know,
accepted a single-use plastic shopping bag in 30 years, and there's
yeah,
still a lot of
there's
plastic
still
in the ocean,
landfills. Yeah.
Jen.
Amazing, huh? That your individual contribution can't change that, because they still keep making them and handing them out in every single store.
Yeah,
So
totally.
yeah. I mean, that's a great example of just like, yeah, and we do what we can do, but there are problems that that have to be bigger community situations. We have to get in.
Well, but if we don't here's the gig. Here's the kicker,
Okay.
because I think that self-care has gone from what does that even mean to oh, have a spa day, and then it's like laughable, and so it's like yeah, don't even talk about that, but which is really interesting
Mm-hmm.
because it's like we're not talking about what we're talking about is community care, self-care as part of it's a team sport, right? Like in so many ways. And so I just saw this thing about Wendell Berry saying how, what is security? Security is, and I'm going to butcher it because somebody else was quoting it. So, but like, how well is your neighbor doing? And what is your relationship with your neighbor? That's
Mm-hmm.
security. Like
Mm-hmm.
the more the people around you are thriving, the more we all thrive. Like it's
Totally.
not so.
And that's very much like the Aquarian age that we're all, but buzzing all about. That's the message. It's like we have to all do this together now. We're not, it's the idea of this like rugged individualism that America very much embraces, almost more so than any other country on the planet, probably is, yeah, it's going to be challenged
Not
now in a
it's
big way.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't work. And
Mhm.
so you have to like I think that I it's helpful to me to realize, oh, it's my responsibility. The care and feeding of this vessel and my spiritual, mental, physical well-being,
Yeah.
that this is like that's my responsibility.
Mhm.
So, and unless I do that, like I become less and less able, obviously, as I become less and less able to contribute to anything beyond just dealing with my, childhood trauma. Like you're,
Yeah.
I'm just like in reactive instead
Yeah,
of
you're on default
response.
mode. That's
Yeah,
the you're
totally.
that's what I
Not,
meant. That's what I meant to say. Like when you're not paying attention to these things, you're in default mode, which is yeah, so stress or whatever your default pattern is from childhood, right? It is a trauma response usually because the culture purposely traumatizes
it's,
us, to
yes.
keep us in consumption mode. And we want to, wants to, there needs to be a problem for them to solve, right? So they're going to push us hard. And then this whole self-care was so cleverly co-opted by capitalism. It's like,
Oh, yeah,
oh, there's just
totally.
so many things to sell you. Self-care. Oh, we got this. Like you need bubble bath and massages and spa treatments and sell. It's like anything else. It's almost hilarious to see capitalism. They love self-care. It's like, this is great. We can build an entire industry off of this. And guess what? now you're ready to go back to work on Monday. Like there's no break, you know what I mean? Like it's just like just enough to keep you back in the game and keep on going. Like so you don't actually question the bigger system, which is why I think it's really key as we talk about these evaluations, and we don't fall into that trap of saying, "Oh, and by the way, this is all on you." Like you need to, evaluate yourself so you can become a more productive member of the robotic team that's going to produce all the widgets that keeps this, juggernaut of destruction going. Look at me. Isn't that a Christmas message? That's my Christmas message for everyone else.
Jingle bells, jingle bells.
Yeah, so there's me in my full Sagittarian self, just saying it like it is.
No, I
But
think it's,
but no,
yeah.
really, like I want to be really clear about that. Like you don't do this work to make the system more efficient or be a more efficient cog in the wheel. Like you do it to disrupt the systems and start
Right.
questioning, what the hell do I really want? Why am I not happy? If your work number or whatever, your productivity number on your chart is like a 2, yeah, there's a lot of problems there. And probably a lot of them have to do with the stories in your brain about what you're telling yourself from the culture that, you should be achieving or not achieving, or, all these to-do lists you're making all the time. And I mean, there's just so many things to unpack in these areas. And that the ultimate goal is to free yourself from those things through this work, not to be a better cog, but to actually free yourself completely, and start something uniquely that only you can do, because that's what the collective really needs. It doesn't need you to be more productive. It needs you to unplug and come up with a totally different way of doing this. That's the work. We're all in it together, but
Yes.
the individual piece of the together is we each have our very unique piece that we're bringing. Like we're all big fabric. I'll use another metaphor. Like we're weaving our own little thread through this, and it's a color that nobody else can, bring. Like we're going to bring our own little thing. So it doesn't matter what it is, but I mean, it's unique to you. So if you're spending your whole life trying to meet this assimilation of what the culture is telling you that you should be, then that's not the purpose of the self-care or the wheel or these, thermometers or however else we want to like put them up. When you assess your year, don't assess it based on like how assimilated, that you've become to this idea that you should be, all these things that the culture is telling you to do. That's not the rating. Like we have to think of like inwardly, how do you actually feel? And I actually really loved when you were talking, if people are watching this on YouTube, you could see it when you're like, I dropped all these things and your body went like this. You went, and your shoulders went back and your hands went out. Like you actually made the motion of expansion. When you said I canceled 3 things, you were like this. And I noticed that, and I was like, there it is, because that's actually how you've succeeded. Your body knows. Your body will tell you, like, is that
Yes.
expansive? Does that feel open? Does that feel like you just grew, like some more room in your spine and like your shoulders went back? Or does it feel like, ooh, tight, like I got to buckle down and do this? And it's not always bad to buckle down and do the thing. I'm just saying that, that's a great way to check in versus, the barometrics that were given from the culture of
It's
whether
a, it's
succeeding or
a, it's
not.
the whole wit can know thing, right?
Yes.
The story
Mm-hmm.
can talk you into anything, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the con is, we're so susceptible. We're all susceptible to the con in 1,000 ways. And
So
we,
many ways.
and that's just, it's human, right? But yeah, I think it's like the questioning, the danger of creativity, the danger of letting people understand themselves, the danger of having people really listening to the wisdom of their body, is that you're less, like you're less manipulatable. Is that the way you
Mm-hmm.
say it?
Mm-hmm.
But so it's like, how do you, Joe and I talk about sample space a lot. Like what are your options? What are the boundaries of the action you can take? And the more stretched and stressed the smaller the options become.
Mm,
And so like when, it's like when you're feeling great, it's like, oh my gosh, the sky's the limit. But when then you get to a point where like, when I was sick, where it's like, you're in bed, that's what's happening.
yeah.
And so it's like, but that's the big extremes, right? But it's like, if you're in just automatic, puppet show,
Hmm.
that's a very small path. It's a really, really small path. And it's like, and so why we need each other is like you can't see it, what's in your blind spots, but the other
Mm,
people standing like, dude, do you see this like avenue that you could go down? It's like, what are you talking
hmm.
about? There's just this little tiny road forward, and it's
Yeah.
like, no, no, actually, yeah, there's like a high-speed train that go to a whole
Yeah.
another country right over there, and it's like,
Yeah.
what?
That's another vote for community, like aware, working outside yourself more, as much as you can with people, because they do see other possibilities that you can't see. Like, we are creatures of our own brains. Like, we manufacture this reality out of our thoughts. So like other people standing around will see out like opportunities and outroads and like other things that you could be doing, or talents that you're dismissing, that
Right,
you don't recognize, that because you have a metric in your head from wherever in your childhood that says that, well, that part of me is not that important or not that valuable, so I don't count that, because I'm not, you know assimilatively beautiful in this way, therefore, this thing I do doesn't count because I'm not whatever, and we all have these stories about how we, fight with the culture back and forth in our own bodies and minds. But I wanted to say that was such an interesting point, because I think when we get to this winter holiday moment, it's a very dark time of year. They were celebrated and honored, these solstice kind of moments, but they were about reflection. And I think some of this work is done at this time. I think this is why we actually in the culture have this big explosion of consumerism and like blah, blah, like it's very dissociative and distracting. Like, look over here, look over here, look over here, instead of really what the season is asking you to do is just sit with some of this stuff. Like, what do I really want? I mean, I just spent a whole year and now I'm in this like rest mode, and I can sit with it and like, how does my body, like, how do I feel? Like, what do I want?
Mhm.
Reassessment. I mean, we are in a Mars and Mercury retrograde, I think. Mars is going in.
Did
So
you see Jupiter's in the sky? Like
Jupiter's super
super
beautiful.
bright.
Yes. Super bright. Yeah, we've had these amazing clear nights. You can see all of the sky. It's so, I mean, really powerful, I think, to see,
For
like,
us, especially, like it's really
especially on the coast,
rare.
to like get the
So
winter sky
rare.
so brilliantly like clear. Um, I was walking on the beach tonight and there was like the crescent moon and Venus just
Oh,
like
so pretty.
bam. It was like a
I pulled
total
over.
new age painting. I was like, what is going on? So gorgeous. But I mean, these, like, that's what I'm talking about though. Like, in these dark twilight kind of energy moments where it gets dark at 4:30. Like, I was seeing that at like 4:15 or whatever. And you're seeing the setting, like the sun and Venus and the moon are rising. It's like, wow, this is hours and hours and hours where I'm still awake because it's not that late. And yet I'm in the dark and I'm inside and it's cold and I can just be kind of quiet and contemplative. And man, the culture hates that shit. It's just like, what can we do? Like, what can we throw at you to like make sure that you're not calmed down? And it's all
Yes.
the hype, and I'm not anti-Christmas. Don't hear me say that. Like, I think it is, there's parts of it that I really think are fun. And certainly those are all stemming from older, Roman holidays and things, blah, we know that. But I think that I've been really thinking about turning 51 and like this whole edge of perimenopause and menopause. And I've been listening to Sharon Blackie's excellent book called Haggitude, which is like the hag and
Oh.
attitude mixed together. Great, great book. I'm listening to it on Audible. And man, she makes so many points about this. And this is this time of year, it would be associated with like this time of womanhood. It's like, it
Mm.
is all the goddesses and deities, the female deities associated with like the winter solstice are these older women, right? And it's really devalued. Like, older women are so devalued in the culture. They really are like, well, you're not given birth and you're not, like, and you even see, I mean, and I would like to say this is like ancient history. It's not, like, especially with the whole Trump thing. And you see all these, posts with these men just talking on and on about, like, if you're not in your fertile, like, if you're not having children, like, you're missing your whole point for, what are you even here for? Like, your whole purpose as a
Right.
woman is to be reproductive. Like, that's your job, or your, like, sole mission as a human being is to be this thing. And if you're not, then, you're totally screwing up. Like, this is not what you're for. And I'm just like, in 2024, to hear people still saying that is
Yes.
shocking. And yet there it is, clear as day.
Yes.
The
Yes.
same shit that men have been saying since 1245. You know what I mean? Like, this is
Yes.
not a new sentiment. Like, okay, this has been being said for a really, really long time. And the denigration of this idea that women are just no value after childbearing capacity diminishes in menopause and perimenopause. So I've been sitting with that, and it's really interesting because I actually am really excited about being older. I think I'm one of those people that kind of always have wanted to be. I'm into elder, the idea of being elder, and I've always kind of liked hanging out with older people, even when I was younger. Um, I don't know why, but it just feels cool to me to, like, have this level of, I don't know, authenticity now that I don't have to pretend. I can just do whatever I want. Like, it really
Yeah.
does. The sense of freedom that comes from being older in a culture that, for younger women, I think there's a lot of performative, assimilation type. And I mean, you keep using the word assimilation because the trans activist Alok talks a lot about beauty being a measure of assimilation and not of actual beauty. Like, and I
Oh,
really,
interesting.
really love that. I was like, oh, you're right. Like, so much of what I think of as beautiful is actually just assimilating to a certain trope of the culture that they say is what is beautiful. And so now I'm referring to it as assimilation. It really helps
I
my brain.
somebody was talking about the this idea of like these traditional women ideals as being the cult of domesticity. And
Mm-hmm.
it has definite eras in which it's not as it's kind of a spotty, like it was really strong in the Victorian era,
Yeah.
like in the 50s it was really strong. It's like now there's, like all the trad wife kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
oh man, I want to go down the rabbit hole of femininity sometime. Um,
Yeah.
just we need to do more of
There's
that
so much up
because
around
there's
that right
so much.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right
The
now
culture's the culture's really dishing it hard right now. And
it's like,
um
wow, really? And
it is surprising, like, how, like, like retro it feels. Like, like, I can't believe this
yeah,
is being said right now. It's so old school. Um and yet, as and yet, I mean, even in, I would say, not that extreme, of dialogue that goes on, I even in, like, the more mainstream, there's very few, positive things that are said about this time of year like this time of life for women. It's almost always considered like a disease, like,
yes,
all the things that
yes.
are going to be wrong with you. And, like, basically, like, losing estrogen is like having a serious health problem. It's so natural. Like, it's totally like hormone replacement therapy and all of that goes back to, like, the mid 19th century. It was really interesting to listen to her book, like how, and the guy who wrote the book about hormone replacement therapy and, like, putting estrogen back in the body was really funded by a pharmaceutical company even back then, like, because they were just
Wow.
like, they wanted to sell this stuff, and so he wrote this book and it became a thing. And yeah, the underlying principle behind all of that is that there's something wrong with you, that because being young and feminine and that's like what being a woman is. And if you're not that, then it's like you're sick, like you have a disease. And so they're going to treat that with everything that they treat it with, right? All this, the medical industry gets involved, like, and they talk about it and defer to it as like something wrong. So I think it's really interesting. And just to kind of bring that long rambling idea back around, as I go into that phase, I am getting more and more interested in this. Like, yeah, what is that? Like,
Have
why
you
is it? And then I think it does relate to this whole idea of winter, like this rest. And like you said, reassessing what it means to be human. Like, what are
Mhm.
we really bringing? Like, why are we here? Because there is a point when you get older, you're like, you're looking back on a lifetime of winters now. And you're like, yeah, what am I doing? Like, what are we all here for? What's my purpose? What's my role? How does this all gonna, how does this play out really? Like when I really want to do what I want to do.
Did
And that's a
have
very
you
dangerous question, of course, for the culture. For, like you said, when we start to contemplate that question is when they are like, oh, don't think about that. We don't want you asking that question. Um,
have, have you heard of the grandmother hypothesis? And
no.
I'm not going to remember the woman's name that did the study, but looking at why, so like most animals don't outlive their fertility. The
Mm,
females, like the lifespan
okay.
and fertility is, like we had this crazy old chicken. She was still raising babe, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
then they keel over. So, um, humans don't, and there's a few other species. It's kind of a shortish list. And it's like, well, what is the evolutionary advantage to having older non-reproductive women? And it turns out that if you look at like statistics from societies that keep track of all like births and deaths,
Mm,
parents that had a grandmother within reach had higher um six, like their child the babies lived longer. Like
mm,
so like
mm,
a higher percentage of those children lived to be 15, all right, or
mm,
whatever it was. And there's like a study done where they looked at all of these records from Finland from like 1750 to, 1875 or something. And like it's a huge advantage. It's like a 37% increase in survivability
yeah.
of when you have and and so the grandmother hypothesis is that it's not about childcare so much. It is. I mean, like there's other studies like showing like the older women were like they knew where the food was. They, when hunter-gatherer societies, it's the wisdom
Yeah.
is also a huge factor. Like it's like you said, we've been through a lot of winters at this point.
Mm,
You're like, oh yeah, like when you've grown food over a long period of time, there's like subtle things that you're like noticing
mm,
that you're like, oh, like there's so much subtle wisdom that
mm,
we accumulate over our lives when we are paying attention, or we accumulate wisdom of the things that we pay attention to.
mm,
I I think. And so
yeah.
anyway, so I think like
Yeah.
it's just the idea that so like as a society, having elders is a total advantage. And
Oh,
it's so
100%.
interesting that our society is
Well, she makes a really interesting distinction between like linguistically calling someone an elder and what that means. Like if you look it up, it's like, oh yeah, like wisdom, and resources and but we don't use elder, we use elderly. And
yes,
elderly in the, dictionary or whatever is like infirm and it's not good. It's like
yes,
it's all very negative associations of like, yeah, you're past your prime, put out to pasture kind of thing. So I mean, even and also a burden, of like and
yes.
so there's this whole like linguistic that actually not have elders, but the elderly is like so when you hit menopause, it's like, oh damn, you're on a road now that nobody wants to go
AARP
towards.
letters.
Yeah, like this is dark down that road. Like you not only are past your prime, but now you're like, yeah, I mean, it's you're kind of diseased and gross and and I think that's why people struggle so hard to try to stay as young, as looking and feeling as they possibly can. And yet, elder is a complete category that America doesn't have. Like we don't even, I mean, other cultures have it. We don't. And I think as a American woman reaching that stage of just like thinking about it, it's really interesting as a part of nurture culture. I think it's a big part of what we need to rethink. Like, how do we enter that consciously, claim it, and redefine it for when we now, like, because we're not living in the past. We're not. Many of us aren't. Um, traditional elders in the sense that that would be we're living in a modern culture, but it's still I think there's a room to create traditions and I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I'm kind of in the blank
Well,
here because there's just not a lot of resources out there. It's almost like and interestingly enough, it is an aging population. Like worldwide, we have more elders now, and we'll continue to have more elders than young people on the planet for some time. Like the population has shifted due to
yes.
lower reproductive rates to being an elder. Like, so this is like a whole wave of people that are kind of entering this, I don't know, in a way, no man's land of like, what, how do we navigate this? I think it's
Well,
fascinating.
and also like when we expand, like who who are we, what does community care look like? What does modeling look like? We're going to a memorial service on Saturday for a friend of ours that is one of the first people we met. She took my very first weaving class up at Clatsop, and she had you know, it wasn't Alzheimer's. She had another um degenerative brain thing happen. So she was sick for, so, a number of years. But for years, we looked to her and we're like, oh my God, when I am old, I want to be just like her. She was so active and so smart and just like such a kind person. Like she's just so much to admire about her. And it was just tragic. It was like, oh my God, seriously. And like she was a nurse. And so like when she got her diagnosis, she told, like we ran into her on a walk and she was just like, I just have to let you know I've got this thing and my brain's going and it's gonna,
Mm,
and it was just like that. And then I think she kind of got, as people do when they have dementia, they get past the knowing, but that was in that kind of
yeah.
like, I know it's coming and,
Mhm.
there's nothing we can do. And it was kind of like, oh, and just getting that opportunity to be with her and sit with her at that time was, she was still modeling
Yeah,
for us how to human, right?
totally.
Like,
Totally.
and like, um, but I guess what I'm saying is I wasn't related to her, like, but she was an
Yeah.
elder for me, because she was, 25 years older than me.
Hmm.
And it's like, I think about all of these people that are showing me how to be older.
Hmm.
And what does that look like? Like if society is telling us it means that you're sick and that you're a burden and that you're, this or that or the other. But when we choose to follow a different path, like I just feel like in my bones, even though like she did end up with Alzheimer's or not, whatever, dementia, she was living a super full life and doing a shit ton of really amazing things and being like totally a great example versus the idea that, well, I'm 65 now. And so I guess I should just like, I just accept that my body should hurt. And it's like, or do you need to a different some different skills now. You need to
Hmm.
do some different things. You have to inhabit your body differently because not everyone who's 70 is unhealthy.
No, definitely not.
And so
I
it's
mean,
like,
like what you said
sorry.
though is interesting is that we actually are living in a time when people live a lot longer than they used to. So one of the points that she makes in this book is that like in fairy tales and stuff, there's not really a lot of like older women in the stories. And the one of the presuppose, like the ideas around that is that women they didn't live that long. Most women
Yes.
didn't
Yeah.
live past childbearing that much. I mean, the health wasn't there, the longevity wasn't there. So not only are we living in a time when we have a lot of elders, like this is for humanity, maybe an
Right.
unprecedented number of elders are on the planet. We have the lifespan. And the thing that happens and I think for elders is that you get the privilege to reflect on your life and like you have different gifts. I mean, there's different gifts being given to humanity from all these people now who have lived this length of time. And it's crazy to me that we're not using that as a resource like that. that isn't seen as like one of the greatest treasures that we have right now, is all this experience and life and
Oh,
wisdom that's sitting on the planet. And yet the culture that we're in, which worships youth, is like, oh, that's all just a problem. It's like
I don't think we worship youth. I don't think
crazy.
we worship youth. I think that
Oh,
we
I think we do.
worship productivity because we do not care for our young in the way that they need to be cared for. And
All right, I would say, I wouldn't even say like kids. I would say it's like youth in the sense of your 20s, maybe, like the most vibrant,
yeah,
strong. I mean, look at every model, every, ad, every, car commercial, like who's driving that car. It's like they're young and beautiful and strong. And that's what America
yeah,
likes to identify with, right? Like
yes,
you're at your
yes, yeah.
peak, peak, that age group is like the hottest, sexiest, got it all going on, smartest. That's who they want us all to be,
I
you
remember
know.
turning 30. Do you remember turning 30 and just being like, oh my God, I'm so old now? And now
But I can tell you that honestly, I've always liked getting older. I didn't want to be like, I was like, oh, good, 30, oh, good for like, and I still
Oh,
kind of feel that way. I'm like, I feel like I'm climbing this ladder intuitively, and I know it is getting better because I do enjoy life more than I have before. Like, I really do like being older. I think I have way more agency and understanding of who I am and way more freedom, like to be myself and not give a fuck like about what other people think. Like that has definitely come with age. And there's so many beautiful things that come with this, with your 50s. I think it's a great age.
yeah.
And so anyway, I'm not to get too like down the road of elders, but I just think it's an interesting time of year to talk about all these things because this is winter and it's the age. It's that point of the year. This is the old hag. This is the woman, the old winter woman, in the Scottish and Irish tradition. This would be the Cailleach, which is like she like dropped all the stones out of her apron as she crossed the land and it created all the mountains. And so, I mean, she's like, has been bone and stone there forever and ever and ever,
Mm.
and creates the winter storms. And in the Celtic lands, Bridget would be she would be the goddess from like Beltane, May 1st to Halloween, and then the Cailleach takes over and she would rule the second half of the year, the winter time. And so that's what I'm going to do, a little winter solstice thing at my place, and that's going to be in her honor. And it's just an interesting energy to sit with. It's not like beautiful or pretty or Disney princess at all. And it's not even like the witch energy so much. It's just old wisdom and winter. And so this ending of fertility, but there's also this beautiful like space that opens up, like the night sky of possibility, that other things, now that the creativity isn't external, the creativity is internal. Like your energy goes back in. It's like, okay, what else will come out of the magical cauldron, because this is not about babies anymore. Not even about, for me, I never had babies. It's more about, creating businesses and homesteads and all the things. And that is, I find myself not wanting, that's not the drive anymore. It's like, oh, I really want to look at like, what's the deeper gift that I'm here as a soul to bring
Mhm.
forth now. It's changing. The mission changes, I think. And I do think
Yes.
that
Yeah, for sure.
if we honored that women would be very much looking forward to this time. And one of the things I've often said would be, it'd be really cool for women to have a fund that was started for them. I've probably said this on the podcast. It's worth saying again. At When
Yes.
they started to bleed, that they would have a little money put aside every time they bleed. And then when they get to be this age, they would be able to cash that out and take a year off and just do whatever they wanted to. Because I
What a
think
great thing.
it
I
would be so transformative for the culture. I think that because that's what you need, that space,
I
not
that's kind of what
a
I got.
weekend, but a year.
I kind of got that because I turned 50 the year of COVID and I got unemployment. I
Yeah, COVID was an
I
interesting
totally
moment.
I
Yeah.
totally I mean, yeah, it was great. I just did so much art.
I
I
think
mean,
that
it
if
sounds
there was going to be like a Cailleach move, COVID, like a pandemic that shuts everything down, is like, that's the move of those goddesses that are like, they're not pretty. Like people might die in the winter. The winter is not a friendly environment, especially if you live back in the day, but yeah, but we got to stop. When you got to stop, you have to stop. And this culture never stops. And so,
so I would like to encourage you
okay.
and me and everybody to just kind of do whatever the sort of assessment, you know,
Yeah.
whatever sort of assessment feels feels right. Like, I mean, not everybody wants to like, draw in a bunch of different colored inks and do whatever I did. Like, that's my way. But like, I just really I'm remembering what um what value it brings to take the time to reflect
Yeah.
regularly if possible, but at least once a year. And
Yeah.
so like, it's
Yeah, I
like,
mean, you can make like wheels of your emotions too. Like, how are you with your anger? How are you with your grief? How are you with your, joy? How's that showing up? And just, give it a little color or rating or, whatever, just so you can get a snapshot of like, oh, wow. And you might be surprised, what comes
yeah,
up.
yeah.
And then, instead of like a New Year's resolution to be like, oh, I'm going to lose 20 pounds, be like, whoa, I should probably work on my anger issues. Or like, I like look at this, like really like not go to the cultural thing, but look at actually what your own inner metric is showing you. Like, okay, like I'm not addressing this. And then if you think of the problems that actually are showing up in your life, like you said, it's all circumstances. You can see the dishes or the hurt back or the whatever's going on. Those are direct correlations to this internal metric, like 100%.
Oh,
Those are just the
100%.
parts we see, right? We don't pay
Right.
attention to the emotional side or the mental thoughts, but like those, that is the actions that follow those things. So it's kind of like a tracing it back. It's like you are kind of going back into the cave of winter, tracing these little breadcrumbs back into the cave and being like, so what really is the root of this, problem that I see in front of me in my life that I'm unhappy about, or maybe not even unhappy about it, maybe just noticing it.
Or and just I think that you like going spelunking during this
Yeah.
darkness and
Mm-hmm.
looking and like asking questions,
Mm-hmm.
I think is really because it's like I don't know, I don't think I'm the only person that does this, but like it's so easy to discount those dashboard lights, back to the dashboard lights. You
Mm-hmm.
have this and it's like, oh, it's easy to discount that little small thing. And then there's this other little small thing. And then there's this other little small thing. But cumulatively, it's not small. And and so it does lead directly to whatever, whatever,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
whatever.
almost like not setting goals externally and being like, oh, what can I do to get to that goal? But reversing the process and being like, what can I address inside myself? And then let the goals like manifest from there. Like they'll come once we address the core issues, right? Of what we're feeling on the in. That's the winter work, is to go inside and to do the spelunking. That's a great, I mean, caves and all of that is really, really appropriate right now. But I had this moment in my journaling the other day, and maybe I'll end with this. It's just when I was talking about gratitude last time we talked, was if gratitude is just accepting everything as is and not wanting to change it, just being like, okay, there's all this shit going on, and there's good, there's bad, there's things I like, there's things I don't like, but I'm just going to sit here and just accept all of it. This is what's happening. This is me. This is it. This is what's going on right now. So here I am. And that is gratitude, right? So gratitude isn't a state of like, it's more like, okay, this is it. This is me. Here I
Mhm.
am. It's a wholehearted acceptance of the feast that is you. From that
Mm.
place, then you can decide, and I would like some more of that. Like if I have this much energy, like you said, I love that we said I had this much energy today, right? So if this is me, this is my life, and I have this much energy, I would rather give that energy to this and
Mhm.
see that more of that, please, and a little less of this. And that's really all it is in any circumstance. It's just so we accept it. We just like, this is me, okay. And now where would I like to tilt my energy that's available towards? Like, what can I lean into and what can I kind of lean away from? And that is like the subtle navigation, I think, that gets us where we want to go, rather than it's got to be some big crazy thing. It's just that day to day, let's, let's do this. Does that make sense? I think that worked for my
I
brain.
do think it's like that, like that game, you're somebody, you've hidden something in the room and everyone's like, hotter, hotter, colder, colder. Like
Yeah.
it's like checking with your body, and your body's like hotter, hotter this way, colder,
Yeah.
colder that way. That's
Yeah.
it's like, how can I step towards towards the heat, you know?
Yeah. I mean, if I only have 10% of my energy today, where am I going to put that 10%? It's going to be on the thing that I want to see, the positive thing that I would like a little more of. And I guarantee you that's not what we usually do.
No.
We usually put it like squarely focused on all things that are going wrong. We put all of our energy on focusing on resistance to it, or on focus, complaining about it, or and instead that's where the gratitude is. Like, we just like, okay, all of it's okay. Like, I accept all of it. And then with the acceptance, you have the path is cleared up of the resistance to be like, and in all of this, there's going to be something in here that I want more of. And not and just pull your energy away from the thing you don't want. Ease it on, like braking gas.
And that's totally like the birth experience, like between before my second birth. I don't even know. I think it was in a book, or maybe it was, I don't know whose words of wisdom was, it's neither good nor bad, it just
Mm-hmm.
is the mantra for that experience. But really, that's the mantra for like most things, because that's when you're in that space of like, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of, I must assign judgment and angst, like, if it's exactly like, I think that's exactly what you're describing, of
Yeah.
that acceptance and gratitude is is accepting what is. And
Yeah.
it changes everything. It's, if you can be in that, when you're in that, you're in a totally different state.
It's a very powerful state, because now you're driving and not being driven by. And what I'm going to say is the culture, because what's really coming through when you're not aware of that state is the culture. You're back in default mode of resistance and like, and like, you're not actually in control of anything. You're never really in control of anything, but like, you're not in control of your own inner experience. And that is
Yes,
something
yeah.
you actually can be in tune with anyway. So for me, it's like, even if something, like you said, it's neither good or bad, I'm gonna say it is both good and bad. Like, it's all of it. Like, it's not
Mhm.
neither, it's
Yes,
everything.
yes,
It's all of it's
yes.
there, all of it's present, and it's always going to be that way. And I think that when we're in a darkness of the year, or when we're getting older, and I'm going to make those associations again, like, it's that kind of same energy, we tend to be like, ooh, like, I want more of this, I don't want more of that, or that I like this about 2024, I didn't like that, and that's all fine. But at the same time, it all happened. And if the thing you didn't want hadn't happened, you would never even know what you do want. Like, they also
Yes, yes,
coexist.
yes, yes.
You can't be excited about a sunny day if you're not having rainy days. You know what I mean? Like, you're not excited about the summer if you don't have winter. Like, they inform each other. So we are made of all these things. So when you're in the darkness, don't resist it, because you're here, and it's like, wow, this is really, really cool. And so maybe the stars are more beautiful, and there's crystally little shiny frost pockets that sparkle when the sun hits them. And there's all these such beautiful things about the winter that only are this time of year. And there's such beautiful things about being 50 or 30 or 20, and like, don't want to be anywhere else. Like, it's just so beautiful wherever you are in your body, whether you're
Yes,
sick or healthy, even. Like,
yes.
there's beautiful things about all those experiences, and they might not be great. I mean, like what you want, choose all every day, but like, there you are, right? So I think that for me is the message coming through right now, is just be with it.
Oh, I love it. Well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll dedicate this one to my birthday and the Cailleach, who is coming through
Well,
loud and clear these days for me.
so here's the challenge. When when the year wanes, when the light wanes, we're not, I mean, there probably are times, but like, we're not shaking our fist at the sky and saying, "Why aren't you still summer?" Like,
Right.
but like, we do that to ourselves.
Yes.
So like, this does seem like the challenge, I just challenged two little kids today to do some outrageously kind thing tomorrow.
Oh, I love
They've
that.
talked to me, and so next week I'll ask them what they chose to do. But like, yeah, like what challenge
Mm,
of accepting yourself deeply, or
yeah.
trying, or just seeking to accept yourself deeply.
Yeah. Especially your darkness, like, especially the things that you normally would be like, this is a problem. When you do those little graphs or whatever, and you're like giving them the numbers, like it would be a really interesting question to add into there is like, and why do I think that's a problem? Why do I want to change that?
The permaculture.
Yeah. Yeah. Permaculture would say the problem is the solution. So looking at why you gave that a low number, like why like for me, it's always about weight. I'm like, oh, I gotta lose weight. I gotta lose weight. But like, there's so many ways if I really sat with it that I know exactly why I have this weight and like how it's serving me, and you know, all those yummy things that I put in my mouth at the time were like so awesome. And I don't really regret any of it. So there's so many, I have to be realistic about it. Like I accept that this is, where I'm at right now. Like,
Well,
and it's
like
okay. It really
being
is okay.
being within, it's actually, I come from skin, that I've got a very slender husband and a lot of
You do.
slender genetics in my realm. But it's actually kind of it's more dangerous to be to be
Especially
kind
in
of
winter.
an underweight person. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
for
for real.
winter, this is like what you
Yeah,
want. You want
yeah,
this hibernation.
exactly.
It's like a
Yes.
little bear meat, Okay, well,
I'm
I'm gonna
telling,
end it
yeah.
there. Now that
All
I'm
right, good.
talking about being a fat little bear, I'm gonna crawl back into my cave,
I love
enjoy
you.
my birthday.
Oh my God. I salute you.
Thank you. All right, I love you so much. I will talk
Oh,
to you again.
bye-bye.